Welcome to Texas Week. I'm Rick Casey. The Speaker of the Texas House, Joe Straus of Alamo Heights, will join us in a few minutes with his thoughts on the legislative session and what we might expect to see happen over the next 81 days. First, though, some conservative Republican legislators who have been wrestling with a huge budget deficit think it's time to tap the state's rainy day fund, $9 billion. Governor Rick Perry has staunchly opposed it, but is he beginning to melt? Texas Tribune's Evan Smith has the latest. Evan?
Hi, Rick. How are you?
I'm doing great. What's going on up there?
Well, you know, the governor has been out on an island. I wouldn't say he's alone, but he's mostly alone. And among elected officials, he's mostly alone, especially, in believing that we should not tap the rainy day fund.
So he's on an island where it's not raining.
Well, apparently, yeah, the weather is sunny, but umbrellas are popped up everywhere else around the state. He believes that we should cut the budget and not use the rainy day fund. He has more recently held the door open to the idea that maybe it could be used, but he really doesn't want to use it, and he has made this his kind of big stand. Now, his folks are saying this is not really a line in the sand per se, but it's clear the governor's position is don't use the rainy day fund. The reality is that it's raining. The reality is the budget shortfall, even if it's an optimistic 16 billion or so, let alone a pessimistic 27 billion or so, that money in the rainy day fund, which is about $9 billion, some or most of it would go a long way to avoiding major cuts in public education, higher education, health and human services, and so on. So as you said, a number of lawmakers no one would mistake as liberals, conservatives, have said, look, we've got to use at least some of the rainy day fund. And right now the question is $4.3 billion of the rainy day fund to end the deficit that is in the current biennium before they write the next two-year budget in which the big shortfall occurs.
And that's what Jim Pitts, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee,
right,
conservative Republican, that's what he's calling for.
Indeed, and he is not alone in calling for that. And in fact, there are many other people like John Zerwas of Simonton, also a Republican, who believe we should use significantly more of the rainy day fund. But $4.3 billion is the number that's being tossed around right now. And the governor is, like I said, outside the mainstream of his own party on this.
Well, we're putting that in perspective. If we need to spend basically half the fund to get rid of the deficit for this biennium before we even start dealing with the projected anywhere from $15 to $27 billion for the next one. That doesn't leave us a whole lot of play for the next
Well, but of course
years.
the next one is, the size of the next shortfall is based at least partly on the current deficit being included. And so if you took care of the current deficit, then you would buy down the shortfall in the next biennium by the same amount. But you're right, you know, without new revenue and without pockets of revenue that could be tapped, it's going to be a cut session, as we've said before. And you know, it's a remarkable thing that even Republicans who consider themselves to be fiscal conservatives are coming out, not every one of them, but a lot of them, and saying, look, you know, we're all for cutting, but just not this much.
Well, they're coming to grips with reality.
Right.
Now, one of the figures I'm hearing is that what we may see is cutting what is now projected as $9 billion in shortfall for the Texas public schools, cutting it down maybe to $6 billion, than some of the other things going for Medicaid and other health services.
Well, in fact, the superintendent of the Dallas Public Schools, Mr. Hinojosa, was before the Senate this week, and he floated the possibility of trying to get that number down to $4 billion and kicking some of the additional cuts that have to come to public education down the road a session or two. But, you know, there are an awful lot of people who are taking this as their opportunity to do to public education what they've thought all along needed to be done: remove mandates on school districts and schools, bust through the class size cap, attack the problem of overpaid superintendents.
And the question is, are we looking at a new normal?
Well, I'm afraid that the new normal is this normal. That's exactly right. The question
Evan,
is...
we're going to have to leave it with that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, Rick.
Evan Smith from the Texas Tribune. We've set up a link to the Texas Tribune website. Just go to klrn.org/TexasWeek.